Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Open Dialogue, another episode for you to hopefully also participate as it's a live show. Please call in with your comments and questions as we really appreciate the direction that you would like to take in the discussion. Today we're going to be discussing the actual topic which most people might think it's not a social issue, but I personally think it is. We're going to be talking about, can we separate Islam from politics? So with me today, as we always have, the prominent Syed Razavi. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for being here as always. And I'm also very honored and have the pleasure of having Sheikh Ahmed, Haneef. Assalamu alaikum. Always a pleasure to see you. My teacher, I know I haven't been into your classes, but I will be listening to the recording and catching up. But no, I am really, really honored to have two prominent intellectuals to discuss this topic today. I think it's a really, really interesting topic because a lot of us, as I hear in conversations daily, that we don't want to get involved in politics and let's just leave that to the politicians, or you know, Islam and politics doesn't really coincide. There's no real issue in just, you know, believing and performing your rituals, which is fine. But I think in today's day and age, we need to open up our minds, transform it a little bit, upgrade it. So inshallah, we'll dive straight into this conversation so that we can have some more awareness. And please do call in with your comments and questions as well. I'll start with you, Sheikh Haneef. Firstly, when we define politics, is there a difference in Western politics and Islamic politics, do you think?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, I think you brought up the most important statement, defining politics. And I think politics is the art of wielding authority, basically. It's the art of wielding authority. In some cases, it might be the art of assuming authority, depending upon who has the authority. Okay? It's the art of wielding authority. And it is a fundamental behavior in human social life. You know, every time, anywhere, human beings gather together to perform tasks that are aimed to a particular goal or particular outcome. You must have, for example, people in charge. You must have people who inspire and provide morale. You know, you must have people who are willing or who are entitled or chosen to assume responsibility when the primary person is not there. This is politics.
Yeah. You
know, so politics is a way of life, and we cannot live in society without politics. You can't be in the office without politics. You can't be in the school without politics. You can't be in the corporate boardroom without politics. And you can't have a country without politics, because there's somebody who's got to be in charge. There's got somebody who's got to appoint or assign the defense for your environment and so forth. So we have that. The other thing we notice in Islam, and Islam has politics, okay? The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, among other things, a politician. Now, we tend to use that word negatively.
Yeah.
You know, we think politicians are equivalent to liars and nepotists and so forth and so on. And that might be true for a certain type of oppressive or unjust type of politics, but it does not define politics. In as much as, for example, let's say the Church of Scientology defines religion. It calls itself a religion. You know what I mean? In fact, you can have an atheistic religion, like Marxism, for example.
Yes.
You can have that, but you can't say, then I don't believe in any religion because I don't believe in atheism. So I think people are anti-politics because they have a narrow point of view of politics.
That's what I'm trying to say.
You know, they see politics as divisive, for example. They see politics as cronyism or trying to seize power for personal ends and so forth and so on, and people distance themselves from that type of politics. I too distance myself from that politics. But it does not mean that politics in itself is something invalid and that we do not engage in politics. Indeed, the person who says, I am not political, is making a statement that is a political statement.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very,
so,
very
for example,
powerful.
let's say when Hitler was trying to get elected in pre-Nazi Germany, and somebody says, "I'm not into politics," it means that they're not going to try to fight against Hitler. It means that you are supporting him.
Yes.
Yes.
No, that's very, very good opening discussion, actually, and I think it really gets to the crux of it, because a lot of us do try to escape the idea that we can actually be, religious, but at the same time, it does involve politics, because politics does have the social issues, the economics, even the law generally. That's what it comes down to. It actually does balance the wheel of life, if you think about it in that way. But again, Syed, coming to you, with regards to politicians, they might not give the best examples. That's why people nowadays, whether it's in the West or the East or whatever it may be, are actually turning away from thinking that we want to be involved or we want to get involved, because there seems to be an entity which is so big and so far gap between the everyday people to what they even are voting for. So how do we bridge that gap, and how do we get politics back into everyday people's lives, where, because at the end of the day, we are the ones that actually do make the difference to who we actually elect and the leaders, and knowing it. But sometimes they're like, well, they're all the same. They just come from a different branch, a different leaf. How true is that?
Yeah, we have to sort out from the beginning. We have to sort out from the leadership. If the leadership is corrupt, we will never be able to establish a proper political grounds or proper political establishment in the society. And this is one of the biggest problems that we have, as Sheikh Haneef also explained, that we cannot escape being involved in politics.
Okay.
We would either become corrupt politicians or become on the right track. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, used to say that I'm the best politician, but he would exclude himself from the corrupt politicians of the time, and he would refer to them as the corrupt leaders of the time. So if we follow the path of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, and establish pious leadership, and the pious leadership would, of course, will do justice in the society, so then we will have a correct political system in our society. Otherwise, we will keep on playing the vicious circle game.
Of course. Sheikh Haneef, as we see today, there could be even some countries trying to come across as being that, that leader, that leadership that actually embodies and, even, for example, Sharia law. But majority of people might find that quite the opposite of what they want. Now, when you have a society that views, for example, Sharia law as something that may be extreme or, not being practiced in a particular way in certain countries as we see today, I know there's a history as to why it's happening. That actually gives a negative idea of our civilization, which, in essence, it is giving all the reasons, because when people do study Sharia law, it gives all the liberties that even some Westerners don't really have. So how can we as Muslims, especially living in the West, don't think that and get muddled up with this sort of political ideology compared to our own? Because I feel like a lot of us, we might practice our religion in the mosques and in your houses, and we'll be religious, but when we go outside and we're in the workplace and even in the banks and the systems that we're in, there seems to be a double life as to some of us that may lead, which is contradictory to our Sharia law, or even our practices generally.
Sharia law in places where Islam is not ruling is quite flexible. There are things in Sharia law that in non-Muslim environments might be not applicable.
Okay.
Even though in a Muslim society it would be applicable. For example, applying hudud. okay, like whipping people for crimes or punishing them for crimes and so forth. In a non-Muslim environment, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You see? So it depends on what kind of constraints that external society might put on you. For example, in traditional societies in general, you would find, let's say, for example, Muslims in a non-Muslim city would live in a particular Muslim quarter. Maybe a Muslim quarter and a Christian quarter and a Jewish quarter and so forth and so on. You know, and these communities would have their leadership and so forth, you see. And yes, in that environment, even it might be in a multi-religious environment, there might be more freedom with respect to applying Sharia. You know, take for example the law of apostasy, okay? Now, the law of apostasy in certain cases, especially for heritage Muslims, born Muslims, might be death. Why death? If that apostate, how should you say, propagandizes that new religion. You know, because religion and law and defense and so forth are all intertwined. So if a Muslim, let's say, a Muslim is free to choose their religion. They're free to go out of Islam and become a Christian, but they are not free to propagate another religion in an Islamic environment because it is tantamount to treachery. You know, it's like, you know, living in Soviet Russia, you know, and the political religion is Marxism, and you're a Marxist, and then you convert to capitalism. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you preach capitalism, you're undermining the state. Okay. Now, laws against apostasy do not apply in environments where Islam does not rule. Yes. For anyone. You see? And that might also go to include certain, maybe sometimes sexual types of crimes and so forth and so on, where one is in an environment where all these temptations are around one and so forth and so on. You don't have the kind of, I would say, preventions that you can have in another environment. I think, you know, these two ideas, the terror of Sharia law, very interesting, the terror of Sharia law. Terror, exactly. It tends to go along with terrorism. Yes. You know, the terror about Sharia law and the fear of politics go back to the same thing. Go back to an environment, a Western environment especially, but not only, a Western environment where politics is normally practiced as a means where certain people can control other people for their own interests, you know? And in that very same society, because they have an historical fear or hatred towards the power of religion, they would find that the calling for any religious law outside of secular law as something extreme. And we Muslims, because we live in this environment where we are subjected to their propaganda, tend to share in these illogical emotional responses towards these two claims.
It's funny you're saying that, because I was thinking about this as well. It's like how much problems we have and see in the Middle East especially, and a lot of it goes back to everyday people living under, you know, certain regimes which are Islamic actually do perform and equally, just like how in the past in Iraq, for example, before they introduced secularism, you know, at the end of the day, people didn't know the difference between the Shia and the Sunni, and then things were introduced from the West to impose in the, you know, in the West Eastern countries that caused the disruption that we're seeing today. And that's what the Westerners don't understand, that their idea of freedom and their terminologies of certain things is different and looked upon differently to different countries. And it's same vice versa. But now that we're so intermixing, and I think some of the Muslims can be a little bit confused, even going back to their own country and preferring to be here, only because of the environment that has been over, you know, colonization and disruption and intervention and all of those things that's happening in the other countries that's come from the West. That's why it's favorable to be in a sort of Western society. And I think over the last few years, hundreds of years maybe even, there is no balance in our Muslim countries, and we can't really call an example even of Sharia law where it's being practiced in the way it should be and where people are actually reaping the benefits, because the law states what it states. But unfortunately, we are, as Muslims, are not upholding and not actually living by the standard of what we actually preach to a certain extent. And I think it's becoming more and more difficult to do that. So Syed, in order for us Muslims living in the West, getting used to the ideas which are more Western, which we sort of think is more like freedom, because it's this definition of freedom here compared to the definition of freedom elsewhere. How can Muslims today, in this current stage, be attracted more to towards their religion, towards the Sharia law, towards the system that we know does uphold, the real balance and standards? Because we're just being bombarded, especially in the media, the mainstream media, that actually we're the ones that are backwards. And over the years, in a way, we actually have done that. Where we used to be in the forefront of even the science and maths and arts and whatever culture, we are now backwards in that. And, the countries are suffering for it, not because the Muslims aren't capable. It's because, strategically, we have been in the Western, Eastern countries by the West, so that it stops us from actually progressing like we did years ago. So how can us Muslims get back to the stage of thinking, no, where we come from, what we stand for, what's the original and foundation is the correct way. And we need to imply and have that here. Not to say, we want Sharia law here, but we need to have a way of living where we can influence without, showing that, we sort of being an infiltrators while here, but we are integrating with our own influences. How is that possible?
I would say that we are not backwards. I mean, although we have suffered a lot of, we have gone through a lot of problems
Exactly.
during last few hundred years, and that was due to the corrupt leaders that we as Muslims have. But actually, the Muslims are. Muslims still have the resources, Muslims still have the scientists, Muslims are suffering from brain drain because the Muslim countries are not taking care of them. But there is no shortage of Muslim scientists or researchers.
Yeah.
For example, just like we were discussing before the program, coronavirus has taken over the world. But Iran is also claiming that they have a solution, and they have found a vaccination for it, and they might present it to the world. And in other fields as well, I mean, just like before coronavirus, Iran again proved to be able to use the modern technology in answering back to the so-called superpower of the world. At the moment, it is the West who is suffering also from brain drain. I mean, if they didn't have the support and backing of Muslim scholars and scientists that are working with them, they wouldn't be able to progress. So if Muslims back off, they wouldn't be able to survive. So we should not be disappointed. We should learn lessons from the mistakes in the past. But inshallah, we hope that in future we will be able to regain. And that's what is creating fear in the minds of those who are against Islam and progress of Islam and Muslims.
I think it's quite simple. It's very simple. Organize a community.
I was about to say that.
Once you have an organized community, your community will have greater influence on the wider society.
Of course, but with having politics in the communities alone, that causes a bit of segregation, because each one has their own idea of what they see politics like. For example, even just going to a particular mosque, even just having a particular, maraja, for example, that causes segregation, and in a way, people don't collaborate. Like, we can't even come across saying in one day for Eid that we're going to, even together we're going to collaborate, and together we're going to say one date. Even that is not even possible for us Muslims in the West to collaborate.
It's not a problem, okay? In terms of, let's say, Eid.
That's
That's just one example.
What I'm saying, according to Sharia, you know, people have different criteria, you know, for, let's say, to what extent Maghrib time could be extended to another place where the sun was, one place where the sun was seen. Right?
Yeah.
If it could be extended to another place that is away from that. For example, if you see the moon, if you see the moon in London, okay, and it's overcast in Birmingham, okay, what ruling could we use? What approach can we use to apply or not apply it to Birmingham as well? You know, and there are different methodologies for that, and there are differences. But I see where you're coming from in terms of, in general, a lack of coordination between communities, okay? Now, let's look at this situation. A lack of coordination between communities. We all know that if our communities do not coordinate, all right, we would not have the same kind of power, we would not have the same kind of luxury even in living in society, all right? So you look at the problem of lack of coordination and lack of unity. And you apply yourself to that. How do we build unity? That is politics. You don't have to have a unity camp versus a disunity camp, if you know what I'm saying. Just like, for example, let's say we form an Islamic Boy Scouts or something, you know, and we want to know who's going to be the Boy Scout leader. And, you know, there are 4 guys who want to be the Boy Scout leader, you know, and the rest of the group chooses which one among these 4 guys. You know, it's not really something that where one guy is going to be like the Khawarij and leave and form his own Boy Scout organization. Maybe he might do that.
Actually, that does happen.
Yeah, maybe he might do that. You see, that reflects negatively upon him.
Yeah.
Or it might reflect negatively on the process. You see what I mean? So what I'm saying is that it's a process that we most necessarily have to undergo. You see?
Yeah, it starts, I mean, again, it starts from the bottom up and then the top down as well, because I see even some small WhatsApp groups will have little, I'm talking from a real level here, which we have to understand that, you know, the everyday people are bickering and then starting their own groups. So between us, we can't even do that. And then again, for something, as you say, as simple as, you know, yes, there is different reasons for, you know, seeing the moon and this, that, and the other, and wherever it may be. But again, how can we collaborate in order to come up with one solution that all of us...
It's an art. Look, some people ask the question, how can we achieve Muslim unity? And let's imagine, do we all meet in a big, huge, mega, universal tent?
Well, it's not literally.
No, I'm saying, how do we get unity? Do the leaders come together and have unity? What is unity? You know, one aspect of unity is getting somebody to behave in the way you want them to behave, without them necessarily agreeing with you.
Okay.
Okay? Like, for example, us living in non-Muslims and Muslim environments. We observe Sunday as a holiday.
Yes.
Okay? We don't believe in Sunday, but we observe Sunday as a holiday.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a unity with people. We actually think of Sunday as a holiday, as something natural. We look forward to it, we expect it. You know? It is to get people to do what you would like them to do, whether or not they agree with you on, or whether they agree with you or not.
Okay, now we know how you work.
And I'll give you a practical example. You know, my daughter, she wouldn't like me to talk about her, but yeah.
You've done it now.
She joined ABSOC in university where ABSOC was Ahlebait student organization.
Yeah, of course.
Was underperforming. All right, and when she entered that university, struck up some really good relationships with the Sunni community.
Okay.
Right, so individuals among the Sunni community, right, the ISOC.
Yes.
Till she had these great ideas of having a unified organization, great stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, and she thought it was possible. She mentioned it to them. They went back to the Amir, whoever it might be, Salafi might be. You know, and they said no, because we don't believe the Shias are true Muslims. They came back and told her, no, I'm sorry. She was gutted. I said to her, don't you worry about a thing. You outperform them.
Yes,
that's it. You outperform them. You don't have to criticize them or fight. You outperform them till you get a reputation in that university as the Muslims. You see?
You need to give me her number. I need her on the show next.
Right? And she did just that. Okay, she started all kinds of programs.
That's
you
amazing.
know, until the people in the Sunni community started to come to her to ask, we like this program. How could you teach us how to do this program? You see?
That's admirable, and that's leadership, and that's influencing.
Exactly.
But
you see?
yeah, definitely.
So, I mean,
we need
it's
more
an
individuals
art.
like that.
Politics is an art.
Yeah, it is.
You know, a person who does not have that art, yes, if they are rejected in the elections, they're quick to jump up and want to go form their own organization. But that's okay. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You see, it is really up to us to form an inclusive and have an organization of consensus and so forth for things to work, and they will work.
And this big question, any one of you can answer: is Islam compatible with democracy?
Islam is democracy.
Because everyone just sees as Islamic being non-democratic.
Yeah. Democracy is a method.
Okay.
Okay. It's almost tantamount to saying something like, is Islam compatible with building prefabricated buildings?
Okay.
Okay. It's a method. Okay. That works sometimes and doesn't work sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, it all depends on the level of awareness and consciousness of the population. Yeah, if the population is distorted, let's say the population feels itself threatened by migrants, for example.
Yeah, so automatically,
Okay?
yeah.
You know, you can't have a proper democracy. You know, if the population feels itself threatened by a warlike country, you know, or weapons of mass destruction, like in Saddam's situation.
Yes.
The population would not respond in a normal manner befitting of a just system that can be brought in by democracy. You see? So it all depends upon the level of education of the population. And incidentally, this is one of the major reasons why Western democracies, like the United States of America, like Britain, tend to fill the spare time of its people with nonsense, with reality TV, Kim Kardashian,
yes.
you know,
even you
music,
know the name,
rock and roll, the whole, even me, you know,
exactly,
rock and roll, the whole, you know, all that type of stuff to get, especially the youth.
Of course.
You know, who are the ones who have the most passion for change, to think of their responsibility in voting and in participating in the democratic process.
So, do you think that there is such a thing as contemporary Islamic thought and practice?
Of course there is contemporary Islamic thought and practice. There's contemporary Islamic thought and practice in practically every field. You know, there's, you know, we have right here an expert in things like cloning and so on. You know, are we compatible with that in terms of giving an educated point of view as to whether cloning is halal or haram and so forth? We have that. You know, one of the first countries in the Muslim world to have sex change operations is in Iran, for example.
Yes.
You know, so we are quite up to date.
So it's okay to have Botox and fillers and things like that to change
Sure. You know, just don't be obsessed about it. You know, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
Well, Islamically, there is no restriction. As far as there are no restrictions, then it's fine. And this question is quite often asked regularly.
Yeah, I mean, Islam is a complete system, you know, that is shaped by everything around us, everything inside of us. I still feel, though, there is still a very big gap between what we, you know, think of Islam and politics in the West and Islam and politics in, you know, the Middle East, for example. But then again, if you think about Islamic politics or just the identity of, for example, Indonesia and Malaysia, there's a different story there. I've been just doing a little bit of research, and for them, a lot of people come out of there thinking that it's a lot of force, where some of the Indonesians are forced to do certain things, like in other Middle Eastern countries as well. But it's more about identity. To uphold an identity is to be forced to do certain things. When we say that we are not forced into religion, but when any sort of Islamic country is sort of, you know, I don't know, going by the Islamic Sharia law and there's certain rules, don't you think that people are kind of feeling that, especially when the laws are so extreme and strict? Like, for example, one person was saying in Indonesia that if they didn't go to mosque for 3 days in a row on a Friday, then that they're going to be reprimanded for something like that, for example. So whether or not that's part of the Sharia law that we follow, but I'm just saying, how do you now, I'm trying to use the right word so I don't offend anyone, how do you sort of like make people, especially in this day and age, I deal with the youth a lot, I deal with everyday people, and I'm worried more about the new generation because I don't want them going further away, and I want them to understand that Islam is not just, it's really not about materialistic at all. It gives you that inner peace, okay? But when we don't see that peace and we don't see that freedom from so-called countries that are supposed to be, enforcing these beautiful laws, then, what do we do about certain things like that?
Well, I mean, I don't think we should, again, conflate extremes in the application of law.
Do you have an example of an Islamic Sharia law in a country that was never extreme in any way, whether it comes to women rights or anything in that way?
Well, I mean, one very beautiful attempt at it is the Islamic Republic of Iran. For example, where women's rights are concerned, you find that the amount of women attending universities are compared to men is about 75 to 25.
But are they allowed to work and be in positions?
Oh yes, yes.
Recently, yes.
Oh yes,
Okay.
That's one example. I think the practice of Islamic Sharia in Malaysia, for example, is quite lenient and quite progressive. You see, I think you have examples like that, and I'm sure you have also small communities, Muslim communities, that are run by Sharia. For example, in places in Africa, Mali, and some of these places, where you have, let's say, culturally speaking, they are matrilineal societies. And they tend to have a much more lenient and inclusive type of relationship with women. I remember I know one non-Muslim acquaintance, a sister who went, African Canadian sister who went traveling through Africa, and she met some women who asked her to marry their husband. Why? Because I like you so much, I want you to be always in my family. That type of thing. So we have these types of things, right? But I think what we are confronted with is a parody, a caricature of Sharia law as represented by ISIS, as represented by Saudi Arabia, and so forth and so on, that are misogynistic, that are forceful, that want to force you to pray and force you to go to the mosque, and so forth and so on. And this is held up for everybody in the world by the media, as the example of Islam.
Of course.
So people now have this unnecessary fear about a Sharia law when they look at Saudi Arabia and ISIS's penchant for cutting your head off every time you disobey the rulings. And I think that is not correct at all.
I do agree with everything you're saying, but I like to play kind of devil's advocate because I hear everyday people's chat, and I just want to bring about everyday people's words into the show, because I think that these questions are not necessarily, heard on a platform where everyone can probably think, well, I'm in their heads, and I'm asking questions that they would, and so hopefully we can get some proper examples as to how we can overcome this. The other thing is, politics as a whole with countries is one thing, and obviously with communities it's another. I think the real problem that I feel we're facing today is our community politics. And I think that if we can actually, like we said before, collaborate, alliance more with our communities together, like for example, we always seem to, even though Islam clearly states to not define yourself in your identity, especially with your ethnicity. We are constantly defining ourselves and being more patriotic to the country from where we come from, rather than just being brother and sister in Islam, to be honest. And we see that in our mosques and our centers, even with the groups that we hang out with and the cliques that we sort of join, the societies that we build. It's nice to have, yes, Lebanese society and Iraqi society, but what are we actually saying? What is this Muslim world coming to? It's more and more segregation as far as I could see. So how do we bring our communities where Muslim is Muslim, or even non-Muslim can be invited in, and we are feeling that kind of real integration between ourselves? Say it. You know, we see this all the time. And that's what I feel is a real shame. And then it also filters down into the household with the generation gap. And that's another politics that I deal with daily, going into households and helping them, families, with that sort of mindset and thought. So give me a few suggestions where, you know, we can hopefully take back, you know, where the audience can sort of maybe get some sort of insight as to transforming that mind, that our religion is from something which takes away all of that. And we should look at each other with just morals and ethics and just human values and humanistic sort of ways of looking at each other. Take away the skin, take away the color, take away, you know, even the language. Because that really all I find that is just creating more and more separation. And that's the real politics that we have to fight against. I'm not saying to eradicate culture, no. But if that's defining us to who we are and who we sit with and who we eat with and who we marry and who we choose, then how can our politics be open?
Yeah, the problem is that there are many Muslims who still don't believe that Islam is a way of life.
Exactly.
And as long as we keep this inferiority complex that we don't have the solution, we don't have the way of life, then we wouldn't be able to be successful. And the beauty of Islamic teaching is that it is a way of life. And therefore it can solve the local problems, it can solve international problems. And Islam does not restrict you to not to follow the examples set by others. For example, there are sayings that don't look at who is saying, look at what's being said.
Yes.
So if a scientist or research or even a politician in other part of the world sets a good example, there's nothing wrong to practice it.
You say that a lot, and we know this, but unfortunately we do not follow this. I see that all the time, I hear it all the time. We are constantly, as much as, you know, for us, I feel in our societies nowadays, in order for us to keep our Islamic values, is to only surround ourselves with Muslims. And to a certain extent, that's true. But if you're going to be proper leaders and influencers in this world, it's not just about your bubble that you build around you. We have to be stronger characters so that we're the influencers even outside and represent outside. My clients are not just Muslim. My clients are from outside, and the fact that I'm a Muslim woman wearing hijab that influences even an 18-year-old English boy that is inspired by my talk. And these are real clients that I have. Like, how many people can say that? Because we don't even go outside to do that. That's what the problem is. So how can this politics, you know, actually come about? I just feel that we need to stop being scared of who we are and be okay. As much as I know we say like our influences influence us, our friends influence us, but then we need to be those characters to be proud that we are who we are. And let's go out there and let's be the influencers by not dictating, but by being in a particular way. So like you said with your daughter, someone coming to them because they're seeing it. Like, we can't also go into someone else's home and tell them to rearrange their furniture. Okay, we can't go into this country and do that. But if we were to invite people to our house and show them the best way of doing it, they'd want to copy it. They want to follow it. That's how you influence. I think our language is not correct. Our ways are not correct. And we are not inviting enough. So before we end the show, we've spoken widely. I know it's a huge topic, but are there any takeaways? Because, again, this is an issue because I think politics embodies everything that we believe in. It embodies economics and law and civil law and criminal law and whatever it may be. And if you want to have any ruling or any sort of following, like you said, politics are in the house, politics are in the schools, politics are in, you know, business. So we should not shy away from it, but look at it differently. But at the same time, we need to be more aware of what it actually means and take part in it.
I think that there are 2 points here. I think that people should probably take notice of. One is it's a generation thing.
Definitely.
The older generation, for example, saw itself as representing a small subsection of the Muslim population, an ethnic subsection of the Muslim population, okay? They did not have the experience of internal politics in a society like this one.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you have a kind of an immaturity to a certain extent in terms of their organizational strategies and so forth. In the sense that, let's say you have a voting for the chairman or the president of the community center, which is what these centers are, right? And when one person is voted in, another person doesn't like it, so he leaves and causes a division. Okay,
Yeah.
This is immaturity in politics.
Happens a lot in the centers, though, right?
Right. Among whom? It happens especially among the older generation.
Yeah.
When you look at the younger generation,
Yeah.
okay, they're much more inclusive.
Okay.
Okay, their standards are much higher in terms of tolerance and so forth, of different opinions and so forth, and they're the ones who are forming now thriving organizations. I do not see a decline in Muslim political organization. I am seeing a rise in the quality of Muslim political organization. If you want to look at the old guard, yeah, you have a lot of fodder, you know, to deal with.
That's so
But
true.
if you want to look at the younger generation,
Yeah.
you know, I was just in Manchester a couple of days ago. I was impressed by what these young people have been doing. You know
Are
what
they
I
given
mean?
the platforms enough in the main centers?
Exactly. Now, when you look at them, they're very inclusive. You know, you might find a group that might be an offshoot of a Pakistani center. They might still be based in a Pakistani center as a young organization, but it will have Iranians involved, it will have Iraqis involved, and so forth and so on.
So it is changing.
This is politics.
Yes.
I think we have to get away from the stereotype of politics because it could debilitate us.
Absolutely.
You know, if you improve your skill at social organization, you know, and out of that you start seeing progress in your social income, you know, your social resources, your social influence and so forth, you are practicing effective politics. You don't have to be liberal or labor or conservative. You don't have to be pro-Iran or anti-Iran. You don't have to be any of these types of things. You know, you could form a very efficient organization, you know, that could influence others, and it will work.
Okay, so I'm joining your next mission then, inshallah. Okay, Syed, we'll end off with you because, you know, you've been in this institute quite some time, and especially being head and leader. And do you think that our Islamic centers are a very good example of now changing and transforming so that we are including the newer generation and we are actually improving the politics even within the centers themselves?
Yes, they are changing. We are witnessing changes, especially during the last 30 years, compared to what we used to have and what we have now is improved a lot. But the improvement is far greater in Australia, New Zealand, America, elsewhere, where more educated community has migrated.
Really? I mean, even though we've got more Muslims here, how come is that?
I mean, like, for example, we have only one Shia school.
Okay, okay.
But if you go to Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, almost every city has a Shia school.
Okay.
And some cities even have more than one school. They are concentrating more on educating.
On education, okay.
But whether the results are good or not, because recently I was in Canada, in Toronto, the community members said that for a while our youngsters went for having fun. And now that they are having children, they have suddenly woken up. And they know that if they ignore their children would not be proper Muslims, and compared to what is happening against Islam. So they are taking more active role in, and these are the youngsters who have been educated, born and brought up in this society. So we have more hope in them. Inshallah, they will take care of the future centers.
Thank you.
We will have casualties, there is no doubt.
Of course. It
but
always is.
We should not be worried about that.
No, of course. No, I think this was a very interesting conversation. I really wanted to highlight, you know, from the different country aspects to bringing it down to the households and the communities, because I think that's what politics is really about. We shouldn't think that it's only government. It actually starts with us. Absolutely. And we need to really be mindful of that. Thank you so much, Sheikh Haneef. It was an absolute pleasure to have you today. I know you've taken your time.
Well.
And Syed Razavi, thank you again so much. It's always been a pleasure. And it's an honor for me to be sitting here with such amazing minds. I just hope that you took away something today with regards to this, and we understand politics a little bit bit different and we realize that our everyday dealings are important, it does make an issue. It does filter. It can filter up or down, and it doesn't matter what situation, what status you're in, you can make a difference. Your voice is important. So do take part, do make a difference, try and be at the forefront. Don't think just because we might be the minorities here, we may not have a voice. Start with your little communities and build from there, and try an alliance with more and more communities. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't even matter if you were to even include someone even outside our religion, to be fair, because we all have same ideologies, which we know in Islam that even outside can actually feel the benefits of it. So in order to do that, we need to be influencers and leaders ourselves. Inshallah, we will be back with another topic and another open dialogue next week at the same time. I hope you enjoyed the show. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.